Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel and happy Halloween. If you aren't aware, this month we played two horror games, Soma and Moons of Madness, and just this week we concluded both, so if you haven't seen them yet, go check those out first and then come back for this video. We will be talking about things that may be considered spoilers, so now's your chance to back out before seeing the ending. So now let's get into what this video is going to be about, and then let's get into it. I wanted to give both my final thoughts on the games, as well as give them a rating of sorts. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there were several categories that I wanted to talk about, so why not just have a more organized approach? Before we begin, I just need to point out that these are just my opinions, and are wholly subjective. There may be something that I say that you may disagree with. There may be things that I left out that you feel were important to bring up. I absolutely welcome you to let me know what you think in the comments. I had a lot of fun with these games, so I would love to have conversations about them. So what are we going to be looking at? I broke it down into categories that I felt were most important to me in the overall sense, and they are the sounds, the visuals, the gameplay, the puzzles, the difficulty, the story, the price, and what is left over. So without further ado, let's get started. The soundscape in this game is incredibly immersive, and as I wandered through the creaking, leaking halls of Pathos 2, I felt the crushing weight of the Atlantic above me. When I was sneaking around, the guttural choking sounds of the barnacle heads filled me with a sense of inhuman dread. And actually being outside in the ocean, hearing the bubbles and currents pass by me, hearing the distortion of waters as fish rapidly swam away from me, having quality headphones on brought these sounds to life, and the soundscape brought this game to life. I would say it was hugely responsible for just how immersive this game is. Just a note, while technically part of the sound category, I will be leaving the voice acting part of the rating to the story section, so we'll talk about that later. The set design was superb. Every square inch of the facility felt like it was paid attention to, and more than that, felt like it belonged. From the fullness of the laboratories, to the photographs taped to the lockers, to the grisly scenes of a dying species trying to survive the nightmare that has become their lives, every piece felt intentional and real. The one problem I had was just about how dark everything was. There may have been a setting that, if I adjusted, would have made it brighter, so this rating is tentative and may not be a problem for you. The dark atmosphere definitely added to the feel. The fact that the facility had gone into emergency mode and everyone has, for lack of a better word, shut down, makes a lot of sense. It's not really a complaint, but the fact that it was just so dark by default made some things hard. Some of the jump scares didn't affect me simply because I couldn't see the thing that appeared in the distance. Very easy to understand and not many keys to use. Nothing was complicated, however I wasn't really a fan of relying on the WoW to refrain from limping. I almost feel that a typical death sequence may have been less aggravating, however it was an interesting feature story-wise. Also, the grab and rotate feature was incredibly underused in my opinion. I was prepared the whole game to turn an item over in my hand to inspect unseen sides for hidden information, but it never came. In addition, there were so many objects and about 90% of them did nothing useful. I feel like it was a cool mechanic that was both underutilized and oversaturated. Mostly they were in the form of reading or fetch quests. While this isn't the most stimulating, it does allow one to focus more on the storyline rather than the solutions. That may be a benefit for some players who aren't as interested in the puzzle aspects, since it won't hold them back from the story as much. However, if puzzles are your thing, you may find this one lacking in complexity. This category is very subjective, as every gamer has a different experience levels and the things they are good at. I'm awful at platforming, so when a game has too much of it, I'll find it difficult, but others may not even consider that as an aspect as challenging. So take this category with a grain of salt. Also, it won't be included in the final score, but it was worth looking at. I will give this a middle-of-the-road kind of rating. Nothing was so complicated that I got frustrated, but there were enough challenges that I didn't feel bored, or worse than that, that I had no agency, and instead was watching a movie. Some games have great stories, but no game to them, and I'm happy to say that this isn't the case. There were, however, several times that were cut out of the video where I was wandering back and forth through the levels trying to figure out where the thing I needed was, or simply where to go next. The truly difficult parts of this game were more just navigating a complex underwater facility, and that may be more of a reflection of my own navigational skills, and you may not have these problems. But again, this section is fairly subjective and isn't applied to the overall score. Phenomenal. Truly unique. From the premise to the settings, I haven't heard of these elements together, and the idea of a Matrix-style digital record of humanity, not even the humanity itself, shot into space from an underwater facility in the Atlantic that unintentionally became the last bastion of humanity after a comet took out all life on the surface, while simultaneously a biological AI hybrid becomes the new dominant species on the planet, and those survivors rapidly self-destruct in an attempt to secure their spot on the record of humanity. Oh yeah, and our protagonist is a time traveler from a century ago. There are a lot of common sci-fi plot lines. Nothing on its own is particularly unique, and to smash so many concepts into a single storyline was a bold move that could have felt like a ridiculous amount of plot. However, I think it navigated that carefully and stitched it together well enough to make it feel part of one cohesive story, the end of humanity. The voice acting was outstanding, and the writing that the actors delivered was superb. I felt like they were real people with real emotions and concerns, and the dialogue felt like it was thought out and intentional. I think they thought long and hard about exactly what they were trying to convey in any given line, and it showed. A wonderful job by all involved and worthy of full marks in this category. I mentioned in the beginning of these series that I got these games at a significant discount during Steam's summer sale. But how would I feel if I had paid full price for it? Would my enjoyment change? This is an important question because at lower price points we can forgive a lot more if something isn't perfect, but when we pay more, the need for higher standards improves. Is my high opinion of it based on the fact that I got a discount? That's what this section intends to find out. This game is highly polished, complete, unique, and offers over 10 hours of entertainment, and I feel that the price tag is well deserved. This is a fairly old game, first released back in 2015, so it's nothing groundbreaking or new. However, the quality of the story, the visuals, the audio, basically everything we've covered thus far, all speak to a very professionally done product. At a full price point, I still think I would have enjoyed it just as much as I had currently. I would say, though, that I wish there was just slightly more content. Maybe an alternate ending to explore on a second playthrough could have been cool. I feel like at $30 I would be fully content with the ability to play it a second time, however I don't feel like there's much replayability, so I won't be giving it full marks. That being said, if you don't mind the price point, it's definitely worth picking up, and if you don't mind waiting, then a sale will make it just that much more enjoyable. As of the airing of this video, it is currently at 80% off, so it's practically a steal. Like I mentioned at the end of the series, there was more to this game than I had the ability to cover. There was a lot of lore to be explored, backstory to be discovered, and set pieces to look over, but I simply couldn't include it all. There were mission logs and recordings that talked about what had happened to everyone at Pathos 2. There were things to learn about the WoW and the local wildlife, and there was a dark subplot that I didn't exactly feel like exploring to great depth. While the story has been told, there are details that have been left out and can be discovered if you choose to play this for yourself. And secondly, like I mentioned in the first section of this review, the soundscape is amazing, and watching it on a video just doesn't do the justice that playing it did. So even though you may already know the story, it'll still feel great being there for yourself. This game was absolutely phenomenal, and I was so happy that I picked this as one of my first horror gaming playthroughs. I would definitely recommend it if or when it is within your budget. The soundscape was well produced and thoroughly enjoyable. The only reason why I didn't get full marks was because of just how aggressive it got at certain points. Not only in the cutscenes, but other parts of the game I found myself constantly having to maintain the volume. Other than that, though, the quality of sounds were great. Every opening of a door or crashing of a piece of equipment, and especially the sounds of the tentacles, tentacle monsters, and the occasional Z-Path creature was very believable. It definitely added to the eeriness of the environment. Absolutely stunning. Every single set piece was highly detailed and interesting looking, but also felt like a real piece of scientific equipment or extraterrestrial habitation. The atmosphere they created was incredibly immersive to the point of my own physical reactions, like the time I almost held my breath as we ran across the surface of Mars without a helmet. and the colors and effects were quite interesting to see, and though some parts were dark, for the most part everything was easily visible, making the horrors quite a sight. The mechanic of having an ARM computer that interacted with environments, puzzles, monsters, and even provided a waypoint was pretty neat. What I didn't like was the inability to rebind the keys, and found the times where crouching was necessary cumbersome. Thankfully, they were few and far between, but on the occasions when it had to be done quickly, I would have preferred that bit of control. Also, there's a lot of reading. Not all of it is necessary to move the plot along, but often they are necessary to at least interact with to move forward, so the player is often stuck reading everything so they don't miss something. They were sufficiently challenging, and more often than not required a bit of critical thinking to solve. Other times math, and on the rest of it I will call don't overthink it puzzles, that are only hard if you were expecting them to be. However, there were a few times when the puzzle had sufficiently stumped me to the point of breaking my immersion. I wasn't fearful or hurried anymore, just frustrated, and once I solved the puzzle it took me a bit to fall back into the story. If you're not one for puzzles, this game may be a little challenging, but if you are into puzzles then it will probably be a good fit. Once again, this is quite subjective. I found it more challenging than Soma based on that puzzle factor mainly. I didn't have much of a struggle figuring out where to go since the game gave you the option to follow a waypoint even though we didn't use it very often. It was nice that it was there. Overall though, I did find this one slightly harder than Soma. However, just viewed alone, I wouldn't exactly consider this a hard game. And once again, these are just my observations and not part of the official score. A man on Mars wakes up to the worst day in human history and is tasked with unraveling a mystery so he can know what to do when the time comes. A true to form horror game from the start to finish, it doesn't get bogged down with questions like Soma, but rather asks the player if they feel up to the task to be the hero. It would be a 4 because I feel like they could have done much more with it. I think the events of the game were a little rushed and the reveal of the witch character was a little predictable. However, it earns back that half of a point because this had some of the best quality voice acting I've heard in a while. This section is going to follow a lot of the same points as the one for Soma, however half a point higher since its base price is a little cheaper. Once again, if this is within your budget and you don't mind paying full price, I definitely feel that it's worth what you pay. There was a lot of entertainment that I got out of this, though it is about 3 hours shorter than Soma, and the quality of all the sections I mentioned earlier makes it feel complete and thus worthy of a standard price tag. Obviously, getting it on sale would be advisable if the price is too steep, and as of this video, it is currently 70% off on Steam. There was a lot of reading in this game. A lot of backstory and lore was delivered through the use of computer terminals and logs. I tried to cover as much of what was going on there as possible, but there were more aspects to the project, to the Z path, and to the characters than I had time for. By going through this yourself, you'll have a much more fleshed out idea of what's been going on there and the characters involved. Make sure you don't skip the computer that detailed all of the blackmail Orochi had on the crew. It is interesting. This was a great story and immersive environment, and I was also very happy that this was in the first set of horror games I played. The story kept replaying in my mind the week after I finished recording. I definitely enjoyed the tale they told, and I would highly recommend this one as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for checking out our little horror gaming experiment for the month of October. I'm excited to get back to our usual content with something new, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on the games if you have them, so let me know in the comments what you think. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.